Marjan Minnesma is the founder and director of the Urgenda Foundation in Amsterdam, which sued the Dutch state for its tepid record on greenhouse gas emissions. Urgenda was joined in the case by 900 citizens as co-plaintiffs in what Marjan describes as crowd pleading. It won a court order directing the government to reduce the country's emissions by 25% by the year 2030. The impact of that success has rippled around the world. On 2 occasions, Marjan has been named the greenest entrepreneur in the Netherlands. Entrepreneur? Well, yes. Marjan has studied business management, law, and philosophy, and has worked at Royal Dutch Shell, Greenpeace, whose world headquarters is in Amsterdam, as well as for the government. Unlike most foundations, Urgenda doesn't rely on endowments or contributions. It relies on the profits it makes from its activities, which it then plows back into the expansion of its environmental activities. It advocates a circular economy where products are not necessarily owned but are leased and then returned to their manufacturers. It promotes sustainable activities in energy, transportation, food production, industry, and construction. And it believes that the Netherlands can be completely converted to renewable energy by 2030. We caught up with Marjan in Noyon, France, where she and a group of fellow activists were stopping on their way between Utrecht and Paris, where they were traveling for the COP21 climate change talks.
We are walking from Utrecht in the middle of the Netherlands to Paris, so that's almost 600 kilometers. The whole month of November to end there just before the conference of the party starts of the climate change treaty.
Okay, and it's a very carefully planned walk. Tell me about that, because you're going through railway stations. You're touching on railway stations very frequently. The number of people changes. Tell me a little bit about the planning, because it's not just a group of people getting together.
No, it's a major operation. We started in Utrecht with more than 500 people, and in the whole first week we were walking through the Netherlands, and then there were every day 200 people, but every day there's new people coming and going, so we see thousands of people during the whole trip. We have arranged through the whole day a coffee break, a lunch, a tea break, and a hotel, and we walk from as much as possible from station to station so that people can hop on and off. And every day there's a new group, so every day you meet other people, and it's a very broad, say, social justice movement. So there's people, farmers, but also teachers and people from local energy corporations, people from very big companies like Unilever and the Dutch National Railway Organization. So it's a very big movement of both business, citizens and NGOs, and they all want that we make a quicker move towards a whole renewable energy society. So no fossil fuels anymore, and only sun, wind and a few other sources. And that's what this whole group wants. And it's not to say an environmental movement anymore, it's a bigger social justice movement, and we just want a new economy.
Which is, and if you've got large corporations actually participating in this, that's quite a change, isn't it?
Yeah, I think 20 years ago that didn't really happen, but now this week someone from IKEA is walking with us, and someone from a big grocery chain in the Netherlands is walking with us, and yeah, it's a whole different group, people from the building sector, people from the mobility sector, so they all can make the switch, and we can all make the change to having energy neutral or even energy positive houses. We can drive electrically and so on. So it's about how building a new society, and it's not only about end of pipe solutions. So that's also, I think, a switch if you compare it to 20 years ago.
It's a very considerable switch, and you've also designed this walk very carefully for the maximum impact, right? So you have a show on Dutch TV every night.
Yeah, well, when I invented this at the beginning of this year, I just told my colleagues I want to walk to the conference of the parties the full month. And we didn't know yet that the Dutch TV would be willing to join us. So 5 months later or something like that, I had a conversation with the Dutch TV, and I told them that I was going to walk to Paris. And I said, that's interesting, and now they're following us and have a 5-minute, say, kind of little show on TV or that show what we're doing. So they show us walking, and they have some conversations with the people that are in our group, and every day it's another group, so every day they have other people on TV, and that shows also for the Dutch people at home how broad this movement is.
It's like a continuing story that they can tune in on every night, and where are they now and what's
yeah,
going on.
and it's about mobility, but also about a Dutch designer who makes clothes in the most sustainable way, and about what we call a vegetarian butcher that makes meat out of soya and other products. So they get the full range of what you can do if you want to move to a new society.
This is actually a wonderful use of resources to cover so much at the same time. It's a very
we're very happy with it.
Yeah, and it levers what you're doing, and the people the awareness that is being built from this must be quite considerable.
Yeah, because every day there are 600,000 up to even 1 million people watching this show. Well, we have about 17 million people in the Netherlands, so that's a very large proportion. Therefore, I think we're now really heading for more mainstream attention, and that's very good.
Yeah, nice. Let me turn our attention to what I've been calling Urgenda, but which is the real name is Urgenda. Am I getting close to right with that?
Yeah, well, in English I would also say Urgenda. It's a mix of urgent agenda. So in English we would probably say Urgenda, we say Urgenda.
I'm trying to learn to say it properly. So you founded Urgenda. How did that happen, and what was the reason for doing it?
Well, I worked together with Professor Rotmans, who was here yesterday also to walk with us, and we were leading an institute for transitions towards a sustainable society at the Erasmus University in Rotterdam. And we had a big program with 40 PhD students who all wrote books, and in the end they said, nice, all those books, but what are we really changing in society? And I challenged him a bit, and then he came up with the idea, okay, let's make this urgent agenda and have a vision for the future, but also an action plan per year. And then we described that in a big newspaper article, and it became a very big article with a front page part in a very good newspaper. So we had thousands of reactions of people that said, wow, are you really going to do this then? Because it's a nice agenda, but who's going to do it? And then we felt challenged, and we decided to make the foundation Urgenda and to do what we wrote down in this newspaper article. That's how we started, and in the beginning we were both working at the university and doing Urgenda on the side, so 40 hours one and 40 hours the other. But Urgenda became so big that at a certain point I said, well, I'm going to quit the university and I'm going to lead the Urgenda and see what we can do.
So in a sense, you called for something to be done and then found that you were the one that had to do it. Is that roughly correct? Right?
That's what often happens.
Yes, absolutely. So now, what are the objectives of Regende and the?
Well, we started with a broader agenda, but I brought it down a bit. I want to go to a 100% renewable energy society in 2030. So we made a book last year in which we described how could you make this switch within about 15 years. And that means that you make all houses energy neutral, and that you drive electrically, and that industry uses less energy and tries to move to renewables, and that you eat differently, less meat and more from the season, more from the region. And if you do all these things together, then it is possible to reduce the energy with 50%, and the rest, what you still need, you can do with solar power, wind power, and a couple of other solutions. And we described exactly how this pathway could happen towards 2030, and also what it would cost. And it would be about 1.5% of our gross national product, which is a lot of money, but it's only 1.5%. We currently spend 2.5 on oil, and nobody knows it. So for a very rich country like the Netherlands, which is, say, amongst the 5 most rich countries in the world, and people are very happy here, and yeah, we have nothing to complain. This is an amount that you can really still afford. And we're not saying that the Dutch government should spend this money, but that people together are going to do this. So it will be both people making their own house energy neutral, driving an electric car, spending money on the more sustainable products, and also the government that tries to help this process, and the industry that makes the switch to 2% reduction of energy per year, year after year. If everybody takes its own part, then we together spend the 1.5%, and that's something we can afford.
So your role is what? Education, promotion, convincing people?
We have a very broad role because we are on the one hand entrepreneurs. So a few years ago we did the first joint collective buying action of solar panels in Europe. So I bought 50,000 solar panels and the inverters and everything needed to put it on your roof. So that was a 20 million project, but I bought the the solar panels straight in China, and if the boat with the panels would be on an iceberg, I had to leave my house. So I was really the entrepreneur in that case. And because we bought 50,000 at one time, we brought the whole price of the whole system down with 1/3 at that time compared to the market price at that time. And we also introduced together with a partner the first electric vehicle that was made in series, that was at that time produced in Norway. And we sold it to a couple of Dutch cities, and they thought, oh, now we have electric cars, now we should create charging points. So then that market started to roll. And then when other entrepreneurs come in, we move out and do the next. And at the moment we are making houses energy positive for around 35,000 euros, and this is the amount that an average Dutch family spends on energy in 15 years. So if you would take 15 years and you spend 35,000 on energy, you could bring that amount forward and make your house energy neutral, which means that you don't have an energy bill anymore, and then pay it off in 15 years time for the same amount. So you don't have extra costs, but you do have a house without any fossil fuels, and after 15 years it's yours and you have a house without an energy bill. So we are in that case the entrepreneur, but also the ones who show that it's possible. Because very often if I propose something like that, they say, yeah, you can say that, but that's not true. So you really have to do it before people start believing you. The same with the electric cars. They were in Norway already for years, and we thought for many reasons that it was not possible or not good enough or whatever, until you just buy them and sell them and show that it is possible. And then people see them driving and they make no noise and you think, oh, that's funny. And then it starts to run. But only talking is not enough. So I also give almost 200 speeches a year in all kinds of different audiences, day or night. But that's, I would say, something on the side. I prefer myself to start projects and to really get things off the ground. But we're also trying to influence both governments and others. We are also, for example, the energy neutral houses. We have a very small group who prepared this. But the normal installers and building sector in the Netherlands are not able to do this. So we are also educating them to show them how they could do it, because it's not my ambition to become a building company or something. I just want to show that it's possible and then have the market come in and take it over. So we're doing many things at the time. We're not really some organization that you could easily put in a corner and say you are an NGO or you are an entrepreneur, or we're a bit strange animal.
Very interesting hybrid of all those things, right?
Yeah, I don't see any other organizations that do the same. You see organizations who do something on solar panels or who do something on advocacy, but I don't see any organization that does all the things on the side.
And your interest really is in seeing the entire transformation right across the spectrum for the whole society within 15 years. Right?
Yeah, well, because I started, of course, in this Institute for Transitions, which is an institute that does in system thinking, and you want to change the system. And therefore you need to push several buttons at the same time to make the switch. And it's just this process of seeing which buttons to hit, and also to see which other organizations are already doing part of that job, and then we fill in the ones that are not done. So we are working on concrete projects to show that it's possible and try to help scaling it up. And on the other hand, we're working on making this movement bigger. That's one of the things we do with this trip to Paris, because there's more and more people seeing us, there's more and more people joining us in. But we also organize, for example, the Day of Sustainability in the Netherlands. So that's since 2009. Every year, one day, we declare this is the Day of Sustainability. And then many companies, schools, and so organize something on that day. And the first time we did this was in 2009, and then there were about 30,000 people joining us, but there are now hundreds of thousands of people joining us. So this is something growing too. So we both work on the movement and on the concrete solutions.
It's a fascinating model. Now you must have some kind of financial partner here. If I'm going to go and convert my house to spend 35,000 euros on my house, and I don't have 35,000 euros, you must have some way of finding a way for me to borrow that money, do you?
Well, in that case, because that's a specific project, we are now helping people to find the money. There's a couple of options in the Netherlands. And what I'm working on is that I hope that the pension funds at a certain point will say, okay, we make this fund, maybe the government can say, okay, I back it up, and then they offer this and they know that they will have it back in 15 years time with, I would say, a small percentage of interest. That's something they didn't want to do when I started, because they said, I don't believe you that you can do it for 35,000. So I thought, okay, then I first want to prove it and then I'll come back. And I think next year I'm in the phase of going back. And then this is what I would prefer, that every citizen could simply get this amount and then pays it back over 15 years time. And because I don't have a banking permit, I'm not allowed to do it myself. So I have to find a partner that has this permit.
So who does this for you in the experimental period?
We do it ourselves. Yeah. Many of the things are things that I have seen that should be possible, and I just start, look for a few people that can help me. But many things like the solar panels I do myself. I just found a partner in China, Dutch people that were working there for 15 years on checking out all those solar firms, and I asked them, how many panels do I need to buy to get a substantial reduction in price? And they came back after a few months and said, okay, 50,000, and then we can have a reduction of 30%. And I said, okay, then we'll do that. And I told that to a few journalists who put it on the front page of their newspaper. Urgenda is stunting with solar panels. And then we got thousands of reactions of people said, yeah, we want to join you. And I had made an arrangement that people could say, yes, I want to join, and they paid upfront 20%. But if we would not succeed in having enough people to buy the 50,000, they would get everything back. So it was kind of you didn't buy until the 50,000 were reached, and then it was really a buying, say, agreement. And before that, it was just an upfront payment, but not really a sale yet. So yeah, I was surprised that thousands of people in the Netherlands say, on my blue eyes, said, okay, I believe you. I never sold one solar panel before, and it just paid 20%. And that was very special. And I thought when I had those, say, millions in the bank, that it would be easy to go to a bank and to say, okay, I'm going to buy panels, and normally you have then 5 weeks on a boat. And then you offer it to your customers, and the 6 weeks you normally need a bank loan for 6 weeks. So I went to the bank and I said, well, I have millions here, I need a bank loan for 6 weeks. And all the banks said, yeah, nice idea, but do you have money of your own? No. Did you do it before? No, 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 no. And then all the risk committees said, no, we're not going to give this. And I was surprised, because I thought, well, I have already sold it. It's a done deal, it's not an idea. And I knew many bank directors, and they all said it's a great idea, but I could not get it done. And until that time, I thought that entrepreneurs who said it's difficult to get money were not handy enough. But at that time I knew, okay, they were very right. It's just not very easy to get money from a bank. So I went to China myself. I went to the solar panel factory and the inverter factory, and I told them, look, I have sold your panels already, but I cannot get a loan. And they were much more inventive than the Dutch people. They said, okay, this is a new business model, because we think all subsidy schemes will go down, and this collective buying might be a new business model, so we believe in it. And we give you a new arrangement. You have to pay us only after 6 weeks, after it has arrived in the Netherlands. And we give you a few cents per watt peak, that's the jargon in solar panel land, if you really succeed. So we emailed all the clients again and said, okay, we made it, and you get an additional discount of 50 euros if you pay us already now. And the funny thing was, everybody paid us even before they had any panel in their garden. So that was, when the boat was still at sea, I had 20 million in the bank account, and I could easily pay all the Chinese without any bank, without any subsidy, nothing. So that was kind of special, and you don't invent that up front. That's just what happened while you're, say, playing the entrepreneur and trying to find solutions for the things that get into your way.
It's your problem-solving process that and in a sense you almost create the money out of thin air, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the money sort of exists,
well,
and sort of doesn't
all those
exist.
people just were prepared to pay before they had, it's all a matter of trust in the end. They trusted that I would do what I promised, and I did. And if anything is wrong, we solve any problem within 2 days. So we also promise that. We give the guarantee and so on. And so far, we still get a lot of emails of people who say, oh, my solar panels are doing great. I had so much kilowatt hour this year and blah, blah, blah. So it's really a community now. that also follows us in all the other things, and it's a group of people that that are very happy, and they were the front runners in the Netherlands, and now you see many other people doing the same or trying collective initiatives and so on. So the market really opened up after our initiative, and that's what we're doing in many instances, opening up markets, making it visible, show that it's possible, and then others think, oh, if it's so easy, well then we can do it too.
Terrific, terrific.
Yeah.
Have the banks taken notice? Are the banks a little more friendly now?
Well, afterwards, some of them said, yeah, we didn't really understand you. And I said, well, that's nonsense. I have a business degree and an MBA, and we understood each other very well. But you just didn't want to pay. Okay, fair enough. But
next time you come around, they may listen a little more.
Well, they still have this risk committee, because I've now been trying to interest banks in those energy neutral houses. And if I do 100 of them, I need 3.5 million. And it's still not easy to get that amount.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it could almost be like a mortgage on the house, couldn't it? Just a little larger mortgage on the house, yeah. But then they'd have to be satisfied that the house would bring a higher price if it had to be sold.
Yeah, and it probably will, but that's not proven yet, because there are no such houses yet being sold. So it's always that they wait until they are 100% sure, and they don't have the inventivity to think, okay, this might be true, let's try.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting that you, whose motives are not financial, are doing the entrepreneurial thing very successfully, and those people whose motives are financial could be making money on these things and they're not, right?
Yeah.
It seems kind of...
Yeah, there's many things very strange.
Absolutely, absolutely. You've also talked about a sustainable economy or a sustainable society and a circular economy. Tell me about a circular economy.
Circular economy is an economy in which you try to keep the raw materials in the system. So if you make a table, make it in a way that if you in 5 years' time say, I don't like the table anymore, that you can get all the components and use them again in the system. So you're not bringing it and burn it somewhere or put it under the ground, but you give it a second and a third life. What's one of the business models under that could be that a company says, okay, I'm selling you the table, but it stays my table. I only give it for use for you, and you pay for use for 5 years. And if after 5 years you think it's not a very nice table anymore, you give it back, and then we use all the components for a next series of tables. So there's a couple of companies in the Netherlands who do things like that. So a company like Philips says, I'm in the future not selling light bulbs anymore, but I'm selling light hours. So you pay for the use and not for the substance anymore. And that's a new model that's now starting here. But it's also that, for example, the waste company might select all the plastics out of the waste and makes new plastic out of it. And that's what's happening in the northern part of the Netherlands. And they make of this plastic a new, say, Senseo coffee machine from used materials. And I told them, you call it vintage or something and not recycled, because then people think, oh, might not be good or something, but if you call it vintage, it sounds much better. Well, things like that. So it's also a matter of marketing, that people don't want a plastic coffee machine anymore that's made from oil, because that's what it is actually. Plastic's made from oil. Well, we don't want oil anymore. We want to use the materials that were already in the system. So there's many different angles to a circular society. It also means that the water company that is making the water clean after use gets everything out of it, and also from that part you can make plastics, but you can also make other things out of it. So in all different ways you try to keep the raw materials in the system and do not burn them, and then they're gone.
And that also requires a new business model, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's both raw materials in the circle, and it is do it based on renewable energy with an eye for biodiversity and your environment. So it's actually the three components that are also part of the circular economy.
You must have run into Ray Anderson somewhere along the line at Interface Carpet?
Yeah, actually Interface was one of the companies that was joining us during the walk, and a number of the people, the current CEO and the sustainability manager, were joining us for a day.
Yeah, because that's been their vision for a long time, and
yeah.
I remember Ray Anderson saying that his idea was that they would just constantly recycle the materials,
yeah.
they would never take any more from the earth, and they would run the whole thing on sunlight. And I thought that is a magnificent vision.
Yeah, every day on our Day of Sustainability, Interface organizes the Ray Anderson event where some speaker in the Netherlands gives a speech about the circular economy or something that has to do with it. So yes, I haven't met him personally when he was still alive, but I think he was a visionary.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And I interviewed him, but not on camera, only in person, and he was a delightful person.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But what a legacy!
Yeah,
to leave us
great.
Like that. Something else you seem to have gotten here too, though, is you've created a sense of adventure around a lot of this, and you've created and you're having fun. I mean, it's obvious when I talk to the people that are walking with you, they're having a wonderful time. They're meeting new friends. They're playing with new ideas. They're seeing new countryside. It's not all grim and
no. And I think that's very important, that people start to see that the new economy, the new way of living is not something that you have 5 sweaters and a carrot in a corner, but that it's about a new economy, and it's fun. It's with young people. It's hip, and I think we should leave the idea of that it's only less and difficult, and that we should move to it's new and different, but not necessarily more expensive, or all these ideas that people have in their head we should leave behind. Because the new economy is fun, and it's about finding new ways to organize yourself without all the waste and without putting CO2 in the air. But it's still a way of earning money, and it's not something that only costs money.
Yeah, and yes, and you don't feel diminished, you may feel wealthier, because we have to redefine wealth too, right?
Yeah, and it also gives usually more health, and it gives more fun, and if you laugh, that's good for your health too. And it gives new societies, new people that work together in a different way. And that's what you saw during our walk. Yeah, every 3 minutes you're walking with someone else, because you are moving all the time. And everybody has another story, and there's many people with good ideas, or who know someone who you might need, or whatever. So there's many things happening while walking as well. And I saw many people that exchanged business cards and said, yes, we should meet each other after the walk and let's do this together, or how can we help you? And that I think is a nice additional thing what happens during all these days of walking.
Happened to me. I have 3 business cards I collected just from meeting people last evening. Yeah, you're right. It's just lovely. Yeah. And, so that brings us finally to the case that actually brought Urgenda to our attention. And in the famous climate change case, I want to come back and talk about the origins of it. But you also did something called crowd pleading, and that's a new one. Tell me what crowd pleading is and how that worked.
Yeah, that's also something I invented. I thought it should not be an organization against the state, but it should be of the Dutch citizens. So I asked people, do you know of any court case anywhere in the world that could be helpful for us? Please think with us. Or if you're a law student and you have a very great argument or what, tell us, so we could make use of it. And you could be the co-plaintiff in our case, and any co-plaintiff can be added, and we pay for it, so you don't have to pay. But it would be nice to go into court with a lot of citizens. So there were in the beginning more than 1,000 people that were joining us, and then the state asked everybody for a copy of the passport and so on. So in the end there were about 900 left, but still great group. And they went every step along the way with us. So even if we only handed in a bunch of papers for the courts, they just went with us, and we together handed in the bunch of papers with children and a lot of fuss around it. So we had a very large group, and I think it's important that the government sees that it's not only Urgenda that wants this. No, it's a large part of society that is anxious to have a change, and that is afraid of what's going to happen if we don't make the change.
And that's a very effective promotion also. Right? That, it's a news item and 900 people go and say we're presenting a paper, even if that's all that's happening.
Yeah.
So tell me how the case began. How did that one come up on your radar screen?
Well, we have a kind of a think tank with Urgenda of people that we call front runners in society. That are people from big business, but also from the media, and people from professors from universities. So it's a very large variety of people, and one of them is a lawyer. Roger Cox, and he wrote a book called Revolution Justified, in which he described that climate change is a big problem, the whole fossil fuel world, and then he said, we are not going to change quickly enough to give my children a future, and the only democratic way that I still see is to go to the judge, because the judge looks at the facts. And the facts are very clear. 195 countries have agreed that we should stay underneath the 2 degrees. We're heading for 4 to 6 degrees. Yeah, we have both acknowledged that we want to stay below 2, but we're not doing that. Well, if a judge looks at that, he might say, yes, you should protect your citizens because that's one of your roles as a state, and I as a judge can help citizens against their state if they're not doing what's necessary. And that was the basic idea of his book. And then I thought, yeah, this might be a way to go. It's at least a democratic way, and I agree with him that politics is too much right-wing, left-wing, and right-wing thinks that environment and climate is something from left-wing, and therefore they don't want to change. And it's stupid, because I'm always saying your right-wing children also have a problem, but somehow it's still this division, and we should overcome it. It should be a matter of all of us. We all want a future for our children. So that was why I thought it was a good idea to try. And then I found another lawyer, and the two of them made a whole court case, and they were very complimentary, and I think they did a great job. But nobody in the Netherlands believed that we could win, because there was a lot of journalists that would phone up professors and said, what do you think about the court case of Urgenda? And said, no, that's a PR stunt and they will never win, and so on. And I was kind of disappointed, because it was clear from what they said that they had never read anything of what we had written. Because most professors that were called were people in environmental law or public law and so on, but we are doing civil law, and that makes it different. And you really have to read it before you give a comment on it, and nobody did. So in civil law you have what's called an unlawful act. And an unlawful act can also be that you don't do anything. So if a government doesn't act, it can be an unlawful act. And in this case, that's what we said. We said, well, you have a duty of care towards your citizens, and you're clearly not taking your duty of care because climate change is a very big problem. And that's acknowledged by you as a country, because the Netherlands were one of the 3 countries that started the climate change treaty in the 90s. So then we were still front runners. You have acknowledged that all industrial countries should do between 25 and 40% CO2 reductions in 2020, but you're only heading for 16, and you might not even make the 16% because we're not really doing very well. And that's strange. So the judge saw this. The judge clearly said, okay, yeah, you have acknowledged that it's a very big problem. And the Dutch, in the whole process, the Dutch state never said, we don't agree with that. They said, yes, it is very urgent, and we should stay below the 2 degrees, and so on and so on. So many things were not disputed. But the Dutch government simply said, yeah, but we don't want to be a front runner. Well, that's a little bit to laugh at, because we are in Europe way behind. We are between Cyprus and Malta. We only had at that time 3 or 4% renewables, and we were the laggard of Europe. And that's what foreigners don't know, because once we were a front runner, but at the moment we are a real laggard in Europe. We have hardly any renewable energy, and we're not speeding up at all. So the judge also said, well, before you are a front runner, there's quite a lot to do. And then the Dutch government said, yeah, we don't want to do too much because we might lose our position. And then the judge also said, well, Germany is heading for 40%, and Denmark and England and a lot of countries around you are all heading for 35 to 40%. Then you can do 25 or 20. That should not be a problem. So many arguments of the Dutch state were just slashed by the judge. And in the end he said, yeah, you have acknowledged that it should be done between 25 and 40%. Maybe 40% reduction of CO2 is necessary, but that's your discretionary power. That's what the state can decide itself. But the minimum level, the 25%, that's what you should do. So that's why the judge said, okay, I'll give this to Urgenda, you should do 25%. And all those professors that had looked at our case did not really read it and didn't see that the main thing is that it's about a dangerous situation, an extremely dangerous situation, that is actually acknowledged by the Dutch government. So it's not something about that we ask for money, or that's why we also called it a court case out of love, because we just want to change. We don't want the money, we want new policies to still have a future for our children.
Yeah, court case out of love and also a court case out of hope was another phrase I think that...
Well, that was something I only noted afterwards, because I hadn't really thought about that. But when we won, within half an hour it was all over the world. I was really surprised how quickly news travels in this case. And that we received thousands of phone calls, emails, letters of people that said, oh, I really thought that we would never get the change anymore, but now I have hope that it will happen. I will go on now. And it gave people hope to continue, because they thought finally there's a judge that sees that this is a real big problem. And if this is one judge, there might be more. So it gave people hope to go on. And I didn't really expect that. That was new additional thing that's, I think, also very nice.
But you seized on that right away too, when you suddenly realized that the world had taken it, and probably nobody was much paying attention until the actual victory, but now they were. And then you published all the documents online in English, and you've been to Australia since, and it turns out you are a front runner in this one. But you've really seized that opportunity too, haven't you?
Yeah, we had already translated most of the pieces while we were doing it, because we thought it might be useful for others, and Dutch is not a language that many people know. And the verdict was translated by the court itself. So at the day that the verdict was given, it was immediately on their website in 2 languages. And that also made it possible to transfer all over the world so quickly. And we think that everybody that has a law system that's based on Roman law, and that's many countries, can use 80% of what we have produced. So that saves you 2 years of research, but it also saves you a couple of €100,000 of finding it out and put it in nice legal language. It's only the last part, putting it in your own system, that you need to do yourself. Because, for example, in the Netherlands, an NGO can go to court for the general well-being. There's many countries in which this is not possible. You cannot go for the general well-being to court. Well, in that case, you can have a class action of citizens or whatever. So that's say, a little bit different system. But 80% of what we have been doing can simply be copied. And that's why we translated everything.
Mm. And one of the key things, I think, is that that you have the Dutch government admitting that the problem is serious, the problem is real. They've already admitted it. They've already said they have to take action. So all of that is you don't have to prove that. That's already accepted.
When we started the case, we thought in case we don't win it, we at least ask the judge to give statements of law that climate change is a big problem and that it's caused by us and so on and so on. So we asked for a number of things. And the funny thing was that he started his verdict with saying it's a big problem and blah, blah, blah. But he said, I'm not giving this statement of law. Well, he already said it in the verdict, so we were already very happy. So we were already happy while he was reading it with all these things, because then we can skip all this discussion on what is climate change happening or not. That's a fact, point. Then we can discuss how are we going to fight it. But the funny thing was he say, I don't give these statements, but he already described them. And then he went on, and suddenly we were looking at each other like, wow, it seems like he's going to give the 25 or 40%. And at that time I was doing the Twitter account while he was reading to inform people outside of the court. And at a certain point I just stopped and I thought, wow, he's going to do it. And then we were all like, but we were not allowed to yell until the 3 judges had left the room. And there were other people of us who were looking through a camera in the room next door who didn't have to wait. So they were already celebrating and we had to wait. But because everybody thought we would never win it, there was a large, how do you call that, unloading or something, that everybody was like crying and yelling. And yeah, there was so much pleasure in the room of everybody who thought we would never be able to win it.
It's a fabulous moment.
Yeah, it was a very special moment.
I gather Roger Cox couldn't even speak for some time.
Yeah, he was crying, and I actually, the 3 of us, it's 2 lawyers and myself, that were say the center of the whole period since 2012. we were all emotional, yeah.
For sure. And it occurs to me too that not only so this judge has found, as a matter of fact, that climate change is real, human-caused, and needs to have a strong response. That fact is the same in many countries, right, where the government has done this.
It's the same all over the world.
Yeah, and so that's a huge obstacle that other cases wouldn't have to confront. There's a similar case going forward in Belgium?
Yeah, they have already started, and there's a lot of countries that are now looking at our case and see if they could do the same. But it takes you at least a year to write it, so I didn't expect that within a few months there would be many more court cases. The Belgian people had already started because they're close to us and they also understand Dutch, so that's easy. But in other countries people are now studying the verdict and see if they can do the same.
Do you have a sense of which countries are likely to follow the lead first?
No, I know that people in Australia are serious, and in Canada, and a couple of people looking in the USA and in Ireland, in, Norway or Finland. So there's quite a few people looking at it. And you never know, because they also have to find the money, because it's not very cheap to do a court case. And I think we have a very good system, because the one who loses pays, in our case, only 13,000 euros. So that's something you can afford. But there are also countries that say you have to pay all the costs of the lawyers of your opponent, and then it might be 500,000. Because I guess that the state has used a special bureau, which they always use, and they're usually not so cheap. So if we had to pay that, then it would be very difficult for us. But this is an amount that you can afford, and therefore in the Netherlands everybody can go to court. But there's countries, I think, like England and America, where it's not so easy to do that.
Now let me make sure I understand that. So if you had lost, you might have had to pay 13% of the government's cost?
So the government now has to pay us 13,000 euros. Well, that's only a fraction of what it really costed to me, because I have also spent a few 100,000 euros in the whole process to pay the lawyers and everything around it. But that's the Dutch government doesn't have to pay that to us. So we have paid our costs, they have paid their costs, and they only paid 13,000 as a fine, which is really nothing. But it means that if we had lost, we also only have to pay 13,000 euros, and that's something you can still afford. If I had to pay the lawyers of the state, I wouldn't have had 500,000 left over. That's half of my year budget, so I don't have that.
It's a pretty good budget, though, all the same. And you were also, I think Roger says that you were one of the first people to really see the importance of his book. Mm-hmm. When I read it, I thought, this is just the book is like a machine. It's so relentless. It sort of says, here's the problem with oil, and it goes through and really proves
Well, for me, he didn't write anything new. I knew everything that was in the book. He had only invented the idea, let's go to court and make it civil law, unlawful act. I've studied law myself. I have several degrees, but one of them is law. And I graduated on the Climate Change Convention. So I did international environmental law. So you read it also with the eyes of a legal expert, and I thought, yeah, it might not be easy, it's never been done before, but I see the opportunity that it might work if you make a real strong case, and it would make such a difference if we would be able to do that. And yeah, you've already noticed I'm an entrepreneur, I take risks. So if I see a chance and I believe in it, I very much believe that I can do it, so then I'll try.
But you tried not to have to do it too, right? I mean, you gave away hundreds of copies of the book, and you also wrote a very detailed letter to the government, basically saying you should do this. And you could sense behind that letter that you were saying, and this is not the end of it. If you don't react to this letter, you will face further pressure and maybe a lawsuit. You could almost feel that. And they obviously thought you weren't going to do it.
No, they're not. Well, I don't know what they really thought, but at least they thought that we were not a problem to them, and they didn't take it serious. And even now, they have decided they go to appeal, and we offer them, you do not have to appeal to ask your questions into the legal system, because in the Netherlands system you have the opportunity that you say, okay, I accept the verdict, so I'm going to do the 25% reduction in 2020, But I still have some legal questions, for example, whether the judge was able to do this. Was this not something that's up to politics? Because that's the main question that our right-wing politicians have. Well, you can go straight to the High Court and say, I have a couple of legal questions, will you please answer them? So outside of the whole procedure. So you accept the verdict and then you go straight to the High Court and ask your legal questions. That is something they could have done, and then we would have been ready within half a year, and then they had the answer to their questions, and we had our 25%. But we're not prepared to do that, so now they first go to the court one step higher, and the one who loses will certainly go to the High Court, and that takes 2-3 years. So now we are going to spend 2-3 years of quarreling, of spending money, of actually retarding the process for nothing, because they know that it's a big problem. So I also think that it's not strategically a very wise decision, because they are the chairman of the European Union the coming year, half year, and they have a lot of fuss again with us, because there will be a period that the Dutch government will hand in their complaint, and then we will react again. That will all be in the period when they are the chairman. Well, we make a lot of noise around it, and until our court case, the foreigners didn't know that we were a laggard, and now everybody knows it. So I don't think it's very handy what they have done, but they do it. And yeah, we will just go on then, and then we'll have another 2-3 years of legal process.
No, I've been told that while the court processes are going on, the government has to respect the present finding, right? Has to.
Well, it's a bit different. It's what it says is that even if you lose, say after 2 or 3 years, then you still have to make the 25% in 2020. And for that reason, the government thinks, well, I cannot take the risk of just going on without taking any measures, and then in 2018 suddenly hear that I still should do 25%, because in 2 years they will never be able to make that. So they say, okay, we'll start to do the 25%, so they're making new policies now, and as long as it's under the judge, we will continue to do the 25%. But legally, they could also say we do nothing until the last day of 2020, and then we close at once all coal-fired power plants and we make what's necessary. But usually doesn't happen like that.
Yeah, well, you would then also cause a great catastrophe within the Netherlands, right? If you close them all.
So that's not, a way a government works. So therefore, they have said, okay, we're going to work on the 25%. That will be our new goal. And until the legal process goes on, that will be our goal. And if we win, we'll see what happens then. But if they lose, they still should make it in 2020.
Mm-hmm. We just have had the experience in Canada of a government that would do that, you know. Mm-hmm. I mean, and that in several cases did things that were clearly illegal, but just relied on the fact that the court case would take so long that by the time the case was heard, they would have already done the illegal thing, and you might win later, find that they shouldn't have done it, but it was done, you know.
Well, in the Dutch system, it means that it would cost them a lot of money, because at the end of 2020, they should make the 25%, and if they haven't, then we can go back to court and ask a fine for every day that they're not making it. And then the fine will be so high, will be high enough to make them act. So it will not be 10 euros per day. So this is the first case that you really have something to push them to act, because normally a government sets a norm or whatever, and if they don't make it, there's nobody who will punish them. They just say, oh, we wanted to do 2% energy reduction and we only made 1. Too bad, and nothing happens. But in this case, if they don't make the 25%, we go back to court and say, okay, we want a fine per day to make them act. And then the fine will be huge, and it will be paid to us. So that will be nice,
will be paid
but
to
it's
the
not what I
foundation.
want.
Be paid to the foundation?
Yeah.
Ah, okay. And then you'll wind up doing it. Having in your entrepreneurial way found a large source of money, right?
Then we will build a lot of windmills, solar panels, whatsoever.
Yeah. And when you were talking about this not being a very smart thing strategically, it also occurred to me that this is a very strange thing to be doing just on the eve of the COP21 conference, right?
Yeah. I thought there was many things very strange.
Yeah, what do you think accounts for that? Why would a government behave in that way?
Well, I think part of the government doesn't take it seriously still, and they think that they will win in the next instance. They still have the same, say, kind of arrogant attitude that this is nonsense. And they were really, the right-wing party was very angry that we won, and they blamed the judges, which is stupid, because a Dutch judge in our system has to answer a question of citizens in civil law. It's not something they can say, this is too difficult or this should be up to government. If you put a question forward, he's legally obliged to give an answer, and he simply says, is there a duty? Yeah, a duty of care is there, and is this and this, and then there's about 5 or 6 factors that he's checking. And if he finds yes, 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 he simply says, okay, then there is an unlawful act, and then you have to do something. So he didn't invent anything. The 25 up to 40% was invented by the countries themselves, and the Netherlands have signed for that. So many of the things that the judge said is not something the judge invented. The judge just looked at all the details and all the facts and said, okay, you have said this, you have said that, and therefore I just simply tell you to do what you have said.
Yeah, so it's like he's in a narrow channel that he can't get out of that channel. He can't say, unless he says that this is not. In other systems, I think somebody might say, well, this is ultra-virus. This is beyond the jurisdiction of the court. And I guess that's what the government, in effect, is trying to say, right? That the court doesn't have the right to make.
Yeah, and that's not true. That's something we will quite simply win. If you, as a citizen, say there is here a duty of care and that is breached, then it's the role of the judge to say something about it. So I'm not very worried about that argument.
Yeah. What's next for Urgenda?
Well, first finish the walk. And we are very busy with those energy neutral houses, so that you don't have an energy bill anymore and you have your house 100% on renewable energy. We want to scale that up, so I'm trying to make new company that's going to do that, and that's going to train people and so on. So that's one of the big things at the moment. We are working on scaling up electric vehicles and building kind of carports with solar panels on top of it for companies that can have their own employees on electric cars and also have the charging station at their factory. So we're doing many practical things that make the ball roll a bit quicker. And I'm working on the circular economy in the region of Frisia, which is a part of the Netherlands. And there's a lot of entrepreneurs there that really want to make this circular economy happening and that want to work together. And that's something I think is very nice as well.
Okay, so you'd be spending a lot of time in Frisia.
Yeah.
What are some of the products that would be in that circular economy? We've talked about tables as an example, but what specific products do you think are likely to come into that?
Well, there's very many. I told already about the plastics and new Senseo's built of vintage plastic. But there's also a company there, for example, that says along the road you have very often those steel bars that try to, if your car goes too much to the right, to make sure that you're not falling over. Well, you can also do that with green hedges and so on. And they catch the CO2, they catch fine particles, and you can a few times per year, how do you call that? I don't know the English word for it, but just get the green off and
prune them.
Yeah, kind of something like prune them and use it for as biomass in the circular economy. So it's if you have a steel bar next to your road, it's only steel and you do nothing with it. If you have it with a green hedge, then you can use it for different purposes. And there's 3 or 4 different purposes that also are things that governments want, because the governments want to reduce CO2 and they want to reduce fine particles in the air and so on. So they, through the process, they have now been able to have connections with municipalities in this area, and the first one have said, okay, plant your hedges and we use that in the future. So there's many different ways of how you can do this. There are also plants that you can plant that are giving both protein, but also can be used in the car factory and can be used to improve the soil and so on, so that you have 3 or 4 different ways to use one plant.
And that is a big piece of it, isn't it? That you're not just looking at it as a single thing, you're looking at it as one thing with many benefits and many different uses.
Yeah.
Which, I ask that because it's helpful for people to understand what a circular economy actually means and how it might work, and it's the more examples you have, the easier it is to understand it.
I understand, yeah. It's a fairly new concept still. We do have an interest in innovations. We are not the researchers ourselves. We are a very small company, and I don't want to become much bigger than we are. But what we do is we look in the market, where are the innovations? There's, for example, a company, small company still in the Netherlands that makes well, they had a new concept. If you have a big server company where there's many computers that do large accounting jobs, then very often they need a lot of cooling because it gets very warm, but they also need to be protected because it might be important accounting jobs. And what they thought is, well, if we bring all these big computers into smaller units and make heating systems of them, we sell them to customers and they have small computing units as heatings in their room. They can have free heating and we have free accounting because we don't need cooling anymore, we don't need to put security in the room, and through a kind of Wi-Fi system it gets to a central point where all the details come together again. And this is picked up by a large company in the Netherlands which have founded and paid their financial means for the next step. And we have asked, well, as soon as you are ready to fit in our energy neutral houses, we would be very happy with that.
Okay. So what would be in my house would be a bank of computers that even if I hacked them, it would do me no good because they only make sense when they're talking to all the other computers at the central hub. Yeah. So it's secure because it's only a little piece that doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and if it's, for example, an accounting job that's very difficult or that you really want to be sure that you have the figures, then you could do 3 houses with the same thing. So in case one house gets robbed or burned, the others can take over. So it depends on how vital the accounting thing is that you need to do, whether you double or triple the function or not. But this just other way of thinking is a new business model that that we are looking at all the time. And I'm also in my speeches all over the Netherlands telling people about new things that happen so that people find each other. And we are testing ourselves because we have now, for example, in the northern part of the Netherlands, we're helping the islands to become energy and water neutral. And we have one house and we have a kind of rooftop windmill on the top of the house. And it works only in areas with a lot of wind and where the wind usually comes from one direction. Well, that happens at these islands. And we are monitoring that. And if after a year it appears to be a good investment, then we might put it on other houses as well. And we put it in a booklet and so on, so people can see, oh, it's already working and they have tested it and so on. And then we hope that we can let this market grow as well. So we're also always looking for new opportunities. We're not the inventors or the researchers, but we are looking for, say, startups and so on that have new ideas that can fit into the new sustainable society.
You said something very interesting just then. You said we are just a small company. You think of yourself as a company, not as an NGO or as a, right?
Yeah, because my first study was business. I have an MBA, so I'm looking at it from a business perspective, and I don't want to have subsidies or whatever. I think it should be part of a new economy. And we are non-profit, and we are non-governmental, so in that sense you are an NGO, but we are a kind of entrepreneurial NGO. So yeah, I run it as a company.
Yeah, I was going to say it.
And I have 15 people on the payroll, so I have to pay them every month. And so I should have enough income to be able to pay them. So that's not different from another. And we don't have donors or something. You can always give something to Urgenda and we will be very happy. But so far that's not more than, I think, 15,000 a year. So that's 1/3 of a monthly payment to all my employees. So it's not much.
That in itself is a fascinating innovation, that you are basically driving the work of an NGO through operating, in effect, a business, but a business that's compatible with your objectives as an NGO.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that seems to me we're running up against all the time is the corporate need to make a profit, that's the purpose of a corporation, and that everything else is seen as being either interfering or a side issue, but you're actually making a profit, but that's not your objective, right? That's a very unusual business model.
Well, I think there are many companies also, like Paul Polman from Unilever, the CEO of Unilever, also He wants to run his business and he needs to make profit to do the next investment, but his purpose is not to make as much money as possible. They have another purpose. And I think there's more and more, like Ray Anderson, CEOs that think of themselves as running a company as a way to help people to get an income, and at the same time make products that are useful for people and that can be used again and again. So I don't see business as bad, and I think that's also typically an old school NGO thing, to think business is bad. Business is not bad. There are bad businesses, but there are also bad NGOs. So I think it should be viable and it should not thrive on subsidy schemes. So you should invent things that are good both to your organization and to the world, and then we are on the right track.
This is a very different model for what would normally be considered an NGO. I think it's quite inspiring, you know. And,
that's nice.
Well, it is, but it's one of those insights that when you see it, you think, well, that makes perfectly good sense, but you have to see it before you can really appreciate it. Ray Anderson said something else that was interesting in a similar sort of way. He said, you know, people say, well, we're going to all this effort to get rid of waste. He said, but waste is waste. If you remove waste, he said, I've never done a waste reduction project that didn't make money, because you're putting all the money into making something that you throw away. You stop doing that, it's more profitable.
Yeah,
right?
well, you probably also know then McDonough and who has invented this cradle to cradle. Well, that's the same idea, that there is no waste anymore. Waste is a raw material. And waste can be either kept in the technical sphere, or it can be part of the non-technical sphere and used as compost or to make green gas out of it or things like that. So you can reuse almost everything if you design more clever, because if you mix everything, then it's very difficult to get the components out of each other. But if you design differently, you can use everything again and again. And it's actually quite stupid that we, as extremely intelligent creatures that go to the moon and whatever, that we still make so many products that are useful afterwards. That's kind of stupid.
And it shows we're not paying attention to the natural world either, because the natural world operates exactly that way, right? The natural world is a circular economy, right?
And we can do things so much more cleverly. And it's just a matter of other attention, other focus, other goals. But everything is already there. It's not something that we should invent. We can do this already. It's just a matter of being more careful.
The formidable Marjan Minnesma of the Urgenda Foundation in Amsterdam. If you're interested in the idea of a circular economy, you may want to look at our interviews with Hugo Spowers, who is developing a recyclable hydrogen-powered car, or Yvon Chouinard, the owner of Patagonia, who wants you to enjoy his sportswear and then return it, so that he can use it as raw material for new products. I think that's the future. Increasingly, I don't want the responsibility of owning products. I just want to use them and then send them back when I'm done with them. For the Green Interview, I'm Silver Donald Cameron. Visit us again soon.